an organization called Climate Intelligence. So this statement, there is no climate emergency, which has been signed by over 900 scientists, from climate scientists, but also geological and geographical scientists as well. So let's just quickly run through what they're saying. Climate science should be less political, while climate policies should be more scientific. Scientists should openly address uncertainties and exaggerations in their predictions of global warming, while politicians should dispassionately count the real costs as well as the imagined benefits of their policy measures. They say that natural as well as anthropogenic factors cause warming. Well, they are talking about the Little Ice Age ending as recently as 1850. Therefore, it's no surprise that we're now experiencing a period of warming. Warming is far slower than predicted, they said in this declaration. The world has warmed significantly less than predicted by IPCC on the basis of modeled anthropogenic forcing. The gap between the real world and the model world tells us we're far from understanding climate change. Climate policy was the next heading. Relies on inadequate models. Climate models have many shortcomings and are not remotely plausible as policy tools. They not only exaggerate the effect of greenhouse gases, they also ignore the fact that enriching the atmosphere with CO2 is beneficial. CO2 is plant food. The basis of all life on Earth is the next subheading. CO2 is not a pollutant. It's an essential to all life on Earth. More CO2 is favorable for nature, greening our planet. Additional CO2 in the air has promoted growth in global plant biomass. It is also profitable for agriculture, increasing yields of crops worldwide. The next subheading was global warming has not increased natural disasters. There's no statistical evidence, they say, that global warming is intensifying hurricanes, floods, droughts, and such like natural disasters or making them more frequent. However, there's ample evidence that CO2 mitigation measures are as damaging as they are costly. The next subheading says that climate policy must respect scientific and economic realities. There is no climate emergency, they say, therefore there's no cause for panic and alarm. We strongly oppose the harmful and unrealistic net zero CO2 policy proposed for 2050. Go for adaptation instead of mitigation. Adaptation works, whatever the causes are. And I think that's a key point, David.
Yes, and if anyone wants to see the data for themselves, metoffice.gov.uk/research/climate/maps and data. You go in there and you've got UK temperature, rainfall and sunshine time series. It goes back to 1890 and you can look at any month you like. You can look at all sorts of statistics and it all shows nothing's happening.
Indeed, which brings us on to other models, Brian and Neil
Exactly. That's the beautiful segue, I think, is the term between these two, because you've been mentioning models. You've also been mentioning that some 900 scientists don't agree with the official agenda. That's a small selection, I should think, of the people in the world. But we don't want to hear their opinion because it would get in the way of the consensus opinion. So let's come in at a different angle and jump back to COVID. This is The Guardian from Sunday. Britain's COVID experts are under attack, but they're just doing their jobs. Those poor experts, people are now pointing a finger at them. So the journalist Fiona Fox says those who attack Neil Ferguson and Sage's pandemic predictions only expose their ignorance about science. So if you dare to attack these people, well, attack what they're saying, you are ignorant and you don't know about science. So let's dig into this article because it's really quite extraordinary. Here's Fiona Fox. We've got quite a few of the quotes. It feels like open season on Professor Neil Ferguson right now. Sections of the media and several columnists delight in castigating the epidemiologist or Professor Lockdown for being doomster in chief, constantly predicting catastrophe and then backpedaling when the worst numbers don't materialise. Seems a bit odd that, because that's quite an accurate statement. But she goes on, opponents of COVID restrictions blame Ferguson and his team at Imperial College London for persuading Boris Johnson to shake off his libertarian instincts and take us into lockdown. One presenter on new channel GB News described Ferguson as a numpty on air, and the very mention of his name attracts groans in some circles. Critics of modelling often compare a big number from one model with the real world outcome. They declare the model's wrong when these two numbers look different. But if people look at the large number of models that have informed our response, they would see that the scientists have always cited a wide range of possible outcomes and emphasise the uncertainty. Just very quickly, David, what's your response to that claim that actually there's been a lot of models talked about?
There's been a lot of models talked about, and they've not been spectacular in terms of accuracy. I wonder, Fiona Fox, I'm just very interested in her background, former leading member of the Revolutionary Communist Party. She got the OBE. She's from an Irish Catholic family. She used to write for or work for the Catholic Overseas Aid group. And she was accused of genocide denial over an article she wrote about Rwanda. And she's a supporter of Glasgow Celtic FC. So that's an interesting CV. The whole Revolutionary Communist Party looking for internationalisation of problems, massive government intervention, that would be her mindset, would it not?
Well, one would have thought so, and thank you for doing that on-the-spot analysis, because it's going to dovetail very nicely with work we've got coming up in the future, which is taking us back to SAGE and the expertise of some of the key players. But let's just move on through Fiona Fox's approach. So she said here that demanding a single message from these models is dangerous because it's asking experts to pretend we have certainty. Including the uncertainties and the range of possible outcomes is critical. If models show a range between 40 and 40,000 deaths a day...
Sorry, 4,000 deaths?
Sorry, 40 and 4,000 deaths a day, the truth will probably be somewhere in the middle. But it's better to show the range than say 2,320 or only highlight the 4,000, which the media has a tendency to do. So I'm not sure whether Fiona Fox has even done an O-level in statistics, but if you've got a range of 40 to 4,000, David, are you always going to take a figure in the middle?
Well, if you've got a range of 40 to 4,000, you have a problem with the model as to whether it's actually telling you anything, because the middle number in that doesn't really mean anything. That's a range of confidence. It can be anywhere within that. And of course, at one extreme, the policy conclusion is don't do anything. And at the other extreme, the policy conclusion is hit the panic button, close down the entire economy and imprison the population in a sort of house arrest. She doesn't seem to grasp the significance of this, and she's not really engaging with the issue, I would suggest.
I think you're probably spot on there. So let's follow up with this comment from her, because she says that was the kind of range and numbers. Sorry, there's a duplication of numbers. This was the kind of range and numbers of the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergency SAGE that they provided in November. Early in January 2021, we saw almost 2,000 deaths a day in line with the SAGE modelling. So clearly this lady is in some trouble here over modelling and interpretation, and indeed the advice that we received. She says that any scientific advice the government included that which preceded the lockdown was a result of hundreds of researchers throughout the UK working collaboratively to constantly reassess data, refine methodology, challenge assumptions, and compare and debate results to reach a scientifically sound consensus. Well, that's a wonderful claim, but of course the reality is anybody who dared to challenge the consensus that they were desperately trying to create was simply banned or shunned or not reported. She says the whole point of SAGE and the SPIMO advisory group is that we don't rely on individual models or views, but develop a consensus of what the science is telling us, which can be useful to policymakers. And it's right that scientists and evidence are scrutinised. The scientific endeavour is based on testing ideas, and self-correction and external challenges make science better. But calling scientists rude names, encouraging the public not to trust experts who revise their data and correct themselves, is anti-science and anti-intellectual. But of course, we know that for the whole of the COVID-19 so-called pandemic, nobody is allowed to have a contra opinion to that coming out of SAGE. So the article was interesting. I bring up this photograph, and Why did it fascinate me? Because it's right at the end of the article where suddenly, above the man himself, Mr. Ferguson, we learn that Fiona Fox is Chief Executive of the Science Media Centre. So that was an interesting statement. Let's make sure everybody can see it. This is how it appeared in the article. And if we go and have a look at them, well, all of a sudden we're into a very interesting organisation. Here we are, an independent press office helping to ensure the public have access to the best scientific evidence and advice. We've got specialist COVID-19 information, and we've also got links through to the COVID-19 vaccine media hub. But where it gets interesting is when we have a look at how they're embedded. So they were created back in 2002, and this is the result of the fact that the House of Lords felt the public needed to renew public trust in science. But the centre itself is now housed in the Wellcome collection. That's part of the Wellcome Trust. And let's follow it through. What are they going to do? Well, they're providing for the benefit of the public and policymakers accurate and evidence-based information about science and engineering through the media. And then it says, well, our favourite, Mike, they're independent. So it says the independence of the social media centre is critical to the work we carry out. We don't have any specific agenda other than to promote the reporting of our evidence-based science, and we're completely independent in both our governance and funding. So let's see how independent they are. Now, I've just taken a selection of the funding here, but we're in this bracket. We notice AstraZeneca, we notice Sanofi, we notice GlaxoSmithKline, we notice the Wellcome Trust, and we notice the one at the bottom as well, the UKRI. I'll come on to that in a minute. And of course, they've already told us that they're housed in the Wellcome collection itself. So people, well, of course, they're all independent. Jonathan Baker's chair, Professor of Journalism, University of Essex, ex-head of news gathering, BBC. We've got Karen Chadwick, the head of commercial finance from the Wellcome Trust. We've got a couple more people. Gavin Ellen, head of news output, BBC. Totally independent. I'm watching your face, David, to ensure that you can see the independence. We've got this one here, Ian Brunskill, assistant editor of The Times. The Times doesn't seem to like the UK column very much at the moment, so interesting. We've got Jeremy Lawrence, former health editor of The Independent and The Eye. We've got the environment correspondents, the Press Association, we've got The Sun, and if we add a few more, The Independent, we've got Rebecca Morell, global science correspondent, BBC News, and down at the bottom, a former BBC science correspondent. But it's all independent. And just so that people can see the detail, here's Wellcome itself. What are they doing? Well, they're supporting the development of new and improved vaccines, and they're enabling better and broader use of vaccines that already exist. And they're involved with media, because this is part of their website where they're pushing out advice for journalists on how to report COVID-19 vaccines. So we've got everything from managing expectations to remember that vaccination is a social norm, understanding concerns, and it goes all the way through to considering the imagery. So if we summarize this little lot, is the SMC independent? Well, here it is. Here's the article with Neil Ferguson, but there's no detail of the SMC, so I'm going to say the Guardian article, rather disingenuous. Here's Fiona Fox herself, founder and CEO of SMC. Who provides the funding? Well, Wellcome provides funding. It also provides effectively office space, and that is the organisation supporting the drive of vaccines worldwide. We've got AstraZeneca in here, we've got GlaxoSmithKline, we've got Sanofi, and the one that I mentioned earlier, UKRI. This is a research institute, but it's directly controlled by the UK Secretary of State. So I think if we say, is this independent? No. Are they going to allow anybody to criticise the vaccine rollout? I doubt it. But we did take the trouble of trying to speak to them this morning, so we sent an email saying that we'd like to ask them some questions. They weren't manning their phones because, of course, they're all at home.